you're all the way in Zurich,
That's
Switzerland.
right.
So
Yeah,
what time
Zurich,
is it?
Switzerland.
The
We
nine.
are we are yeah, 20 past 9 in the evening.
So you've already had a whole day, and I'm
Yeah, mid-morning start and sort of gearing up for just having a little bit of a chat with you. Yeah, I mean it's great to be here. So thanks for the opportunity and yeah, just have to start with a quick disclaimer that all opinions are shared are my own and not don't reflect that of any organization.
Yes, these are you only represent Rodney today.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have Rodney, and you are our first virtual guest. There's also co-host Julie, but she's not here. She doesn't always make every episode because she is important and has lots of duties, while I'm
Yeah.
just the video guy. But yeah, we have Rodney here, who we were gonna have a whole conversation about insurance and the involvement of that industry within the oil and gas and energy industry in general. But you know, I think there's a lot to cover and talk about other than that. And I think we planned on telling kind of your whole story. You have almost 3 decades of experience, right? So why don't you just,
Yeah.
why don't I sit back, drink on this LaCroix, and you tell everyone about your fascinating history in the industry?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, it's come up as a sort of a topic of discussion recently. Obviously, a couple of posts and, people wanting to sort of, thinking about transitioning and pivoting out of the oil and gas industry or just career development, generally speaking. So, for me, where did it all begin? Growing up in New Zealand, sort of grew up in a geological paradise. I didn't really appreciate it at the time, So the landscape kind of found me in a way. I was always drawn to the field work side of things, I must say. So I love being outside, and so I kind of gravitated more to the field work side of things of geology, and it just sort of found me. And at university, they were offering good timetables, offering great field trips. And at the end of my degree, it's kind of like, okay, what now? Well, mining sounded like a nice, lucrative career for a New Zealander. So off I went. That's really as simple as it got. The landscape basically shaped me very early on.
A Kiwi. Yeah,
Yeah,
New Zealand is very fascinating to people here in the States. Besides Lord of the Rings, I think everyone understands it. It's known for its beautiful geography and kind of like pristine perfectness. Like everything there is perfect and everyone there lives forever and whatever. When it comes to the industry, I guess I wouldn't have known outside of my experience here at Collide, but recently I have learned that, if I'm thinking New Zealand, even Australia, I'm thinking about mining, not exactly, oil and gas, even at, they're doing offshore on the west coast of Australia. And they do have, gas and oil plays on land there. But when it comes to New Zealand, I have no idea what's going on there. I don't know y'all's energy mix. I don't know anything. I just kind of think of it as this perfect bubble island.
Utopia in the South Pacific. Yeah, a little bit of the sheen has come off New Zealand recently, but yeah, when I grew up, it was very much, the sort of the ideal um, energies, well, playground, geological playground. But in terms of energy, I mean, there's a gas deposit on the sort of the west coast of the North Island, but it's not really until I got to Australia, basically in the sort of my geological class, there was, 13 of us. We went off to Australia, quite early on and got on the oil and gas track quite early. And it was really going into the desert and the Cooper's Basin, the Simpson Desert, there's a vast desert landscape where, sort of my entry point into the oil and gas industry was as a mudlogger. And
Wow.
that was back in the mid 90s. This was before, well, GPS was sort of around, but we were given hand drawn maps on four wheel drives and a 9 liter container of water and maps where these land rigs were, and we sort of had to make our way out there. I mean, looking back on it now, it was a wonderful sort of foundation of experience of the oil and gas industry, but quite an adventure to get to these rig sites were following sort of the rig tracks, if you like.
Yeah, I got a firsthand experience like that because I don't know if you noticed, but last July I went out to the Northern Territory and I was with some of the guys from like Empire and Tamboran and all that stuff. They're doing a big play in the Beetaloo. And I got to go through like these back road mazes essentially. But I did have the help of Google Maps that just somehow knew we were there, even at we're like 6 hours inland in the outback. It's pretty crazy and desert out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's vast, remote, stunning. Anybody who spent any time in the desert, they will appreciate sort of what it offers. Of course, it's isolated, but it's quite a stunning landscape to experience. Yeah, so I was in the Cooper's Basin. It's an old oil and gas field now, but it's funnily enough coming full circle now. They're looking at making it as a sort of a CCS, carbon capture and storage hub now. So it's kind of coming full circle, sort of 25 years later. Yeah, so that was my sort of first real entry point into the oil and gas, and those were the days. Little mud logging shack, and the drilling supervisor would sort of come in and plonk an old bag of cuttings on the table, and you'd have your sort of very rudimentary drilling uh, parameters there, and you just sort of please make sense of this and report back to me in the morning. So small teams, vast landscape, big challenges, but that was kind of my start of my journey in the oil and gas industry.
I mean, what was it like back then in Australia? Because they're so known for their regulations. Um, they're just so, there's some kind of crisis that's kind of going on now that I hear about, like on the East Coast, where they have all this gas inland, but they're importing it in, right? Like, was it a lot like that? Just to go on an Australian tangent, how would you compare the time you were there, the look of energy to today?
Yeah, it's hard for me to look back and sort of see when this sort of developed, but if I mean, it's just my personal opinion, but Australia should be one of the, should be an energy giant, right?
Yes.
And it's sort of been sort of sleepwalking for the last sort of 15, 20 years, even probably at the time that I was there, but I was so sort of deep in my, Cooper's Basin, old school petrology cuttings, and I didn't really look at the greater energy landscape. But I get your point. Yeah, for the last sort of, it should be an energy giant.
Yeah, I mean, you say opinion. I mean, I mean, people are just starting to realize that now. I don't know, but I'd almost call it fact. But we don't need to be talking about Australia. They'll figure it out. They'll get there. What happened next? You're in the desert, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
what?
it was in the desert, and then as you sort of, I followed a sort of the typical linear route through the oil and gas industry, and I ended up in the Gulf of Mexico and Houston, actually, where you're currently sitting. Fond memories of my time in Houston.
Mhm.
So I was with Schlumberger, oil and gas service provider, and they needed. It was kind of in the days where they were doing a lot of cross training. So you would be doing a little bit of mud logging, you'd be doing a little bit of LWD, MWD on the side whenever there was room for it. And I remember specifically ending up on, it was kind of my first, this was the start of deep water drilling, the high pressure, high temperature. Those were the days. And I was on an ENSCO 7500 semi sub platform. And I went out on the helicopter, no safety training, no nothing. Arrived out on the Green Water Canyon prospect, ENSCO 7500, and I was told at the time by the recruiter that I was going out there to assist rig up for this job. It was a state of the art campaign at the time, huge amounts of technology anywhere, everywhere, and I remember going out there and just, it was basically myself and what has become a good friend of mine were out there rigging up and putting these cables up and all of these places on the side of this platform. So that was kind of, yeah, that was my foray into sort of deep water oil and gas exploration in the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow.
And yeah, and there were little stints in California, kind of going back to small mud logging containers, shallow wells, constant rig moves. Some time down in Mexico as well, sort of onshore. But those were sort of my first sort of deep water experiences.
That's
And that
already
was, yeah, so that was the contrast, right? So you're on these small dinky little land rigs, rig moving every month, to being on these big semi subs, bigger teams, but still sort of that practical mentality of just getting stuff done.
I'm assuming that's it. That's already so much. Then here you are present day, or is there more stories in between?
No, no, then it's, the boom and bust cycles of the oil and gas industry. And those were the days, in Houston where tools were lying in the shed, and people were looking for other opportunities. And just through sort of luck, really, I ended up in the UK sector, coming more back to sort of well site geology work. Um, yeah, so I was involved with the Rosebank field, which they are still deciding whether to produce this field or not. Fantastic field, it's the surface location is halfway between the Faroe Islands and northwest Scotland. So sort of,
Wow.
it's in Arctic proper. Was on a drill ship at the time, massive drill ship, the Stena Karen. And this drill ship, just to give you a sense of the size, it was too wide to go, the girth to go through the Suez Canal. So it actually had to go around the Cape Horn and up the west coast of
Right.
Africa to get up there. So, yeah, I was on that project for the better part of about a year and a half, I think, in the UK sector. So that was geosteering days. So we've gone from, simple little dinky rigs in Australia to deep water, high pressure, high temperature wells. And now we're talking about geosteering, a thin reservoir, but quite an extensive reservoir. So we were just, guiding the geosteering tools and the cleaner sands along this reservoir to sort of maximize recovery.
So is this what's considered like the deep sea, or what is it called?
Yeah, no, that is deep sea. Yeah, that I mean the riser was in, I think it was about 1,500 meters of water from memory, but yeah, it's deep water. Yeah.
What do they call that area of by the UK? They say there's like a name for the area. Is it just deep sea, or is it there's something more specific? The North Sea or something like that.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
North
So
Sea.
the North Sea is the area between Norway and the UK, but this is
Oh,
this is
this is the
this is
other
on the
side.
west coast of Scotland. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, so sometimes, crew changes were a nightmare because the weather was very unpredictable. There was a lot of the time was sort of waiting on weather, and some amazing storms out there in the in the Arctic up there. And I remember it was sometimes we were either crew changing out of Scotland, an old military base in the northwest of Scotland, or Aberdeen, or the Faroe Islands themselves.
Wow. I mean, yeah, you
Yeah,
would talk about the utopia of New Zealand. Everyone, a lot of
yeah,
people have seen the Faroe Islands. They're like these like vast, lush, like crazy, like mountain shapes, and then there's like a beautiful like one house on it, and it's like someone just
yeah.
lives there. It's like, is it like? I mean, you're in the middle of the sea, but like, do you see any of this geography around? Is it beautiful, or is it just cold and miserable?
Well, cold and miserable, but when you were flying in and out by helicopters, those images, those classic images that you see of the Faroe Islands, yeah, that is exactly what it's like. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
What is let's this isn't going to be the deep sea offshore episode, but what is it like just going from land to the rig, even like Faroe Islands, like what is it what is just any stories or memories, or just what's that process like? It sounds kind of crazy, enduring.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a question of adaptability. You're there. There's a sense of camaraderie on the rigs. You've got a specific role to do. Yeah, the landscapes are incredible. I could talk about some times up in Hammerfest in the north of Norway. Those are also, very incredible experience that you have on, as part of your sort of your daily job, with the northern lights above the rig, and a vast snowy landscape, and just sort of incredible people, hardy people that live in these places, like in Hammerfest in the Faroe Islands.
I mean, how old are you during all this? Like you can't have family, friends. You've already traveled around the entire world. Like what is that like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain point of time where this sort of occupation will become more difficult. Let's say, if you have a partner and kids. And I did have young kids at the time, although I was working in Norway at the time when the kids arrived. I met my wife in Houston actually, so very fond memories in Houston.
Wow.
But yeah, so when the kids arrived, you do look at things a bit differently, and you want a fixed rotation, or you want a more of a sort of a regular schedule to obviously spend more time with the kids. So I started looking for other roles, and sort of led to my time in Norway. I was working on the Norwegian sector for about 8 years, and that covers sort of Stavanger through to Hammerfest, like I talked about before. It's a refinery town in the far north of Norway. And there I had a rotation where I was doing the good years, I was doing sort of 2 weeks on, 4 weeks off. So that was brilliant for sort of family life.
Yeah, it actually kind of works. I mean, I have my own kids too, and I think it's healthy to separate, from them, whether it's you and the kids or you split the kids, the young one sticks with mom and then the old one gets with dad for a few days. So, kind of adapting and just making it work. That actually sounds pretty interesting, you know.
Yeah, I think 2 and 4 is it's a nice schedule. And the best feeling was standing on the platform. You can hear the helicopter blades, and you just switch off. You switch off for 4 weeks, and you're a home dad for 4 weeks. And even coming back to sort of my 9 to 5 job now here in Zurich, one would argue that I was more switched off and sort of a family present person in that 2-4 schedule.
Yeah,
You
that's so
don't take
interesting.
work home. You don't sleep on it.
All right. Well, that's already so much, but I have a feeling there's more.
Yeah, another sort of boom bust cycle. And at the time I was part of a small team of well site geologists, operations geologists in Norway, and there were simply too many projects um, for geologists needed. And I just started looking around. I was based in Switzerland, have been based in Switzerland, sort of kept my family in the one location, and I would travel for work if that makes sense. So they've always been um, had the stability here in Zurich. So I just started looking around at what can a subsurface guy with my sort of experience do in locally. And I came across a radioactive waste disposal project, which kind of sounded a little bit sci-fi at the start, but I was also quite curious. And it just turned out that perfect time. They needed someone of my background to lead the sort of the exploration phase, and in particular, sort of bring more petrophysics into the work program. So it was like a scientific project. It was very data orientated, exploring the subsurface, no resource extraction. So it's a real sort of mind shift. You're drilling wells to acquire data.
What exactly is this waste disposal industry? Like, how do you explain it in a simple way?
Yeah, I mean, so the nuclear industry here in Switzerland, they have quite a legacy of nuclear waste. Currently, it's sitting in a processing plant in the north of Switzerland, and they want to find a long-term solution and store it in the subsurface. And they've identified a clay layer, a clay formation called the Opalinus clay, and it's about 600 meters to 6 to 700 meters deep in the north of Switzerland. And they would like to build a sort of an underground facility and to store the high level waste and the low level waste in this clay layer. And so I was part of the exploration project to sort of de-risk that safety concept. So they'll do the geological investigations, not just the boreholes, but a whole seismic program, also geomorphology, surface assessment. And I was part of sort of linking the dots with the geological investigations by drilling a series of boreholes in the near vicinity to prove that the clay layer was you know remarkably boring to store the waste. There's no fractures, there's no flow, there's no chimneys, etc. to get for the radioactive waste to come into contact with a water table in the future.
Yeah. Is clay known to be the best way to store nuclear waste?
Yeah, no, there are three different rock types globally. Obviously, there's no clay up in the Nordic countries, and Sweden's probably been the forerunner for finding solutions. But they obviously have the granite up there, so they don't have the clays. And then, yeah, Yucca Mountain, that's an interesting one. That is sort of look more like um, a tuff formation, really. It's not like a clay. So yeah, you've got two or three different rock types that are kind of acceptable in the disposal safety cases for waste storage.
That's cool. I haven't really had anyone in our community or in our bubble really have that experience where I've heard that. Obviously, we do a lot with CCUS, and I hear like they like to go to salt domes and other things like that. So it's pretty
Yeah, that's
interesting.
the other one. That's the other one. Yeah, so it's salt. Germany has a big history with salt. Yeah, so that was the third one on the
Hmm,
list. Salt, clay, and granite.
nice. Okay. Man, that's crazy. It's like there's a lot of public perception about what we're doing underground. We're drilling and mining, and then we're putting stuff back in there, right? And you think about fracking, and there's people hear lots of it's more of the negative side when it comes to fracking, what people hear and think and understand. And then when it comes to carbon capture, it's like, oh yeah, get rid of it, put it in the ground, screw it. When it comes to nuclear waste, that's everyone. I mean, you would picture like The Simpsons, like cartoons, like these barrels of green bubbling with like skulls on them. Like, obviously, it doesn't look like that. But what is like the public perception of storing nuclear waste? I don't even know what we have done in the past and what we do now, current day.
Yeah, no, I think, it goes back sort of, 40, 50 years ago. I don't quote me on when the program started. And again, it was the US and Germany, they were sort of the forerunners for finding locations, and they both kind of chose, for better or for worse, salt layers. And that comes with, it comes with its own pros and cons. Oh, by the way, all rock layers sort of comes with their own benefits and minuses. And for whatever reason, and in the former times, you can go back and look it up, but and not to criticize anybody, but they had some issues, and at least in Germany, with water inflow into these earlier projects, and it wasn't communicated. So that leaves a sort of a lasting impression on the public, right? They're very attuned to these sorts of things, especially if it's not communicated in a timely manner. So that's kind of, in a way, that's where you get these stories of, the public perception against nuclear waste disposal. But I think, in the last, decade or so, various countries, whether it be Switzerland, where I was involved, or France, Sweden, and Canada, they're making, good progress in terms of sort of proving their safety case. And, they're making, it's coming a long way. There's still a lot to do, though. There's obviously a lot of legacy waste. And if we think about the whole nuclear renaissance coming, we're going to obviously be generating, one can call it waste, one can call it spent fuel, but it will be spent fuel. So we do need to find a solution for a lot of the material. And, one might look at advances in recycling and things, but there will still be spent fuel. And one could look at it as a temporary solution, one can look at it as a more of a long-term solution.
Well, we'll save the gritty details with all that for another episode because that sounds very fascinating. But fortunately, or whatever word you want to use, you just kept going, from the desert at Australia to the Gulf of Mexico, these offshore rigs to nuclear waste. I mean, how diverse does a portfolio get for someone in your industry? What comes next after
Yeah, what
this?
comes next? Yeah, it's then it's the world of insurance. So yeah, the Swiss project, it was sort of, the field work aspect, the sort of the exploration side of things was coming to a closure. And a big part of my contribution to that project was sort of bringing the workflows, those established workflows of the oil and gas industry, like the petrophysics and the geomechanics, into the project and making sure that, we got the best possible data. But once that sort of that, exploration field work was coming to a closure, sort of had my eye on the horizon. What else can a guy with my subsurface experience do? And I was just sort of standing. I don't think, talking to my colleagues now, I've been in the insurance industry for 2 years, and talking to my colleagues, it's actually a very natural thing to fall into insurance. But I was just sort of standing on the side of a football pitch, watching my son play football, and I was talking to another father, and he happened to be an underwriter at an insurance company, and we got exchanging, and he found what I was doing was interesting, and decided, they had some interest in carbon capture and storage. And, having been involved in a geological disposal project, I could give some feedback, and gave an internal talk to the company that I'm with now, and sort of the rest is history.
Okay. I mean, you said you kind of naturally fell into insurance. I mean, it didn't sound too natural. How exactly does that work?
Well, what I meant was, people in the insurance industry, I don't think, well, there'll be some, but typically a lot of the people that, a lot of my colleagues, they sort of fell into insurance. But if you think about it now, like a lot of the work that I'm advising or ground truthing or de-risking is, projects that I was involved with in the past. I made reference to the Cooper Basin in Australia, right? That's going to become a CCS project. So I'm quite familiar with the geology there. So in a way, it kind of made sense. My main point was that it was, it's just a very sort of a natural process to have an exchange, have some common interest. I was curious about what they were doing. They were curious about what I was doing, and yeah, that's how it came to fruition.
Yeah, you got the actual experience to make the right decisions. You're dealing with risk
Yeah,
and
I
stuff like
mean,
that.
if yeah, I mean, I lived this type of risk for many years as we've gone through. So, that accounts for a lot when you've got underwriters, they really want to understand the risk.
So, what does the day-to-day look like in this insurance industry?
Obviously, there's a big conventional portfolio, but they're also very focused on the transition side of things. And you mentioned CCS, hydrogen, whether it's natural hydrogen plays. Obviously, a big renewables portfolio as well. So, sort of a day to day, it's very much sort of project based. There's a couple of things that I'm working on the conventional side of things. There's quite a few things in terms of carbon capture and storage. It's obviously it's a new type of risk to the insurance industry. There are a couple of new products in order to price, to make sure that they get the premium right when they offer those products to the industry. And obviously, a big part of it now is there's a lot of interest in nuclear, as you're probably aware in Houston.
Maybe can you like compare the insurance industry you're in to like car insurance or insurance I would use on my expensive camera gear? Like what exactly are you
Yeah,
de-risking or supporting?
yeah, okay. So I mean, we often think of insurance as like, our personal surroundings, whether it's for a car or a home or your life coverage. But the role of insurance really extends, far beyond the individual. This is kind of industry insurance. It's sort of like you know, it's a foundational pillar for the global economy. Nothing moves without insurance. So in an industry like the energy industry, it just wouldn't be able to operate at that scale if these projects are not insured. If you're looking at sort of the business lines that I've been working with of late, the carbon capture and storage or utilization and storage, it's geologically driven, right? So if you can't prove that you've got a safe store at the end of your value chain, that business case collapses. So that's a real incentive for the insurance industry to try and understand that risk. The simple thing, to come back to, what insurance means is, if you think about a lot of the fire protection in your home. um, a lot of the sort of the devices in or your studio, a lot of the devices that you might have, whether it be fire alarm, fire extinguishers, these are all exist because the insurance industry demanded it, right?
Right.
It
Exactly.
wasn't, it just didn't sort of magically appear. So, there's a lot of benefit from the insurance industry. And yeah, I do a lot of talks at the moment about the sort of the energy transition space, whether it be, CCS, coming to any of the other transition products. And it's really changing the mindset of using insurance as a sort of a strategic enabler rather than sort of like a back end expense.
Hmm.
Whereas most people perceive it as that personal, oh, it's the car insurance, it's the house insurance. Or if you were in a conventional project, you would go to the far right hand side of your procurement list. Oh, I'm going to spud a well. Okay, what do I need here? Oh, I need insurance now. So in the transition space, when these products are new or anything new, they need to be sort of earlier engagement.
Right. Yeah, it's not exactly comparable to what we see uh, commercially is, personally the way the cars and stuff like that. But could you maybe explain, I mean, we're not trying to like sell your company or what y'all do really, but
No.
what is like a product or like a package, you know, that you offer? And is there like I'm assuming there's like different tiers to it.
Yeah. So for, like, well, let's go to something that maybe the listeners are more familiar with. It's carbon capture and storage. And for 90% of that value chain, there are insurance products to to cover that policy, whether it be property damage, business interruption, construction. These are things that the insurance industry has, 60 plus experience with, and they can price that accordingly because they have, 60 years of experience and data. But with things like the potential leakage of CCS, or if a if an operator will have to give back the credits, the ETS credits, the carbon credits, if they were have to surrender those credits, those are two new products that the industry hasn't had to price before. And of course, if you've only got 12 industrial scale CCS projects globally, over a sort of a 15-year time frame, that's quite difficult to price. So we've been developing a pricing model that we could offer clients to cover those products that the market. Not all projects will be needed, but what we're seeing at the moment is the the leakage risk is going to be required in most locations.
Right. Yeah, it's always tricky to itemize, what your product is and come up with these prices and stuff, or let alone convince someone they need it. I mean, this is an optional service, right? Like what is the issue with these projects not choosing insurance?
Operators have their own captive insurance, so they might bundle it in their own insurance policy. But other jurisdictions might request, the government might stipulate that they need insurance for the liability of the risk of a leakage, of the the carbon that's been sequestered leaking to the surface.
Okay.
So it just depends on the jurisdiction, and it's an evolving industry at the moment, and new regulations are changing. But yeah, just trying to keep up to date. And the different jurisdictions, everybody's trying to get their head around, what the CCS looks like in different jurisdictions. But yeah, it's an exciting space.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack that out of my wheelhouse. This is the 101 podcast, so I can only go in so deep till I lose track of what the hell we're talking about. But I had someone on recently who works in DC here in the US, and she's dealing with a lot of CCUS stuff when it comes to permitting and regulations. And I'm kind of getting a vibe of like a similar, conditions you go through. Is Switzerland a the best place to be in your industry? Is it more complicated? Is it more neutral? What is it about Switzerland specifically?
Yeah, no, it's there's no real subsurface industry in Switzerland. They've never explored for hydrocarbons, and mining is very small and things like that. So from a pure subsurface geology place to be, it's not really a great location. I chose it as sort of a, location for, sporting activities, lifestyle, and good place to raise the family. But when the team that I support are international. It's a global company, so I support the team, and most, if I'm honest, most of the energy risks are written through London. So
So yeah, your days of going back to the field and all that is done, and you get to pick and choose where you are. So it doesn't really
yeah,
have to do with anything.
yeah, no, I don't. Obviously, when we started the conversation, it was all about the field work, and I guess, fill the field work bucket with my sporting activities, and get the kids out in the outdoors, and show them what it's all about, and make meaning of the landscapes around here.
Yeah, that's great. I think you've put in your time. You deserve all that.
Yeah, yeah. No, the times in the deserts and jungles in Arctic, it's nice. It's nice to reflect on, but yeah, it's it's not easy with the family, I think.
You're right. A lot of cool stories out of it, at least.
Yeah, no, lots of good memories. It's just sort of going through what we might talk about tonight. It's Yeah, it is. It's been a nice journey. And this is the thing, we don't really appreciate the oil and gas industry for what these opportunities have been able to provide. It gets a sort of a bad rap that we are where we are today because of the oil and gas industry. There's no two ways about it. Could it do a better job? Yes, it absolutely could. The careers that people have had, like myself, going through have just been amazing. Is it the way that it was now? I'm not sure. People were sort of, colleagues of mine that are still in the industry, things have changed a little bit. But I still think there's good opportunity there, and it's going to be around for a lot longer, whether we can openly talk about that or not.
Yeah, that's great. Why don't we kind of end talking about more of this holistic look at how everything is in energy? I mean, here in the US, we got a president screaming drill baby drill, and we love all the money we make from our industry, even that there are a lot of people against it, and it's pretty political over here. But what is the view over there in Europe? I mean, you're sitting there in Switzerland saying, with the right mindset, saying, it doesn't matter what you think, like we're gonna survive and live off this stuff for another century, no matter what happens. What kind of things do you pick up from, the culture, the society there in Europe?
The energy realism that you have on your side of the Atlantic, I think, it's a little bit lacking on this side. Um, there's some great technologies, renewable energy. Obviously, it's contributing to the energy landscape in Europe. But I think there's a sort of an awakening now that most of our grids, especially if we look at the Iberia blackout, I'm not too sure if you were familiar with that. There was an event sort of April earlier this year where basically Spain and Portugal and southwest France basically shut down for 24 hours, right?
Yep.
And that was a lot of that behind that is this sort of this push behind this mantra of 100% renewable energy. And I just think it's going to be very difficult to achieve that. Certainly in the timeframes that we're all sort of, the net zero 50. So I think there's a sort of an awakening that's happening in the last couple of years. More and more people are talking about it, and I think under the surface, whether we openly talk about it or not, I think there's a realization that, yeah, we're going to need some forms of fossil fuel for far greater lifespan than what we thought. And, renewables will come on, but it's a much longer game than what we're talking about now. And
Yep. I mean, you said it right with energy realism. That's a really good way to put this talking point I like to bring up. And yeah, energy realism is realizing that 2050, 100% renewables, may not be what's going to happen. The mix will definitely increase and get better and better, but that might just be too soon.
Energy realism, yeah, it's a nice way to sort of to finish on that. And I think we've taken energy security and affordability for granted in a way. And yeah, now we've got to sort of I write a column for a subsurface magazine called Energy Matters, and I've been quite vocal about sort of a reconnection with our energy, understanding. Most of the people just put a plug in a plug socket and they're fine. But if we really understood what was needed to power that device that you're plugging in, or to when you go down to the tank station to fill up your car, what was really required to achieve that. I think, yeah, most people really don't appreciate what's going on behind the scenes to get us there.
Yep. We spread the same messages here over in Texas at Collide. But to end it, yeah, I was reading some of the articles you wrote. I think it's really cool. What's some of your favorite pieces you've covered in the last year, and what do you want people to check out?
But basically, there is one called energy realism, or a return to energy realism. There's other ones where I talk about the nuclear waste storage projects. So there's a couple there that readers can check out and read up on, probably better than what I conveyed in the podcast. There's also ones about CCS. Yeah, so those are the sort of the topics that I cover. Energy matters. We should appreciate it. We should have a bit more realistic conversations about energy going forward, and what the energy transition means. We're probably at a stage now where we've come to a point of the end of energy transition 1.1, and what will 2.0 look like. And nuclear looks like it has a good future, and that future makeup, should we be able to clear some of the regulatory hurdles, and upskill a next generation of people to provide us with the energy. And I talk a little bit about energy density, the energy density ladder. For a long time we were going for the next energy density product, right? We were going from wood to coal, from coal to oil, oil to gas to nuclear, and then all of a sudden, sort of in the mid 80s, we started. Oh, sorry, it was sort of around the Kyoto Protocol time. We sort of lost our way a bit, going to lower energy density products, which have made the electricity prices uh, increase. So, yeah, we need to sort of resolve that
Hmm.
issue.
Yeah, we were doing so good, and here we are now. That's a
No,
good,
but it's a realization. Yeah, we're in the what's called the adaptability trough, right? Yeah.
right. Rodney, I think that just about does it. Everyone, welcome to the Energy Transition 2.0, and let's hope we make it out.
No, thank you. Thanks for listening, and for the invitation. And to the listeners out there, who, the industry that you start in might be just the one that shapes the horizon that you end up chasing, which is kind of where I am now. It's coming full circle.
Yes, literally full circle, as this man has circled the entire globe multiple times.
Yeah, no, it's been a great journey. So no, it was a pleasure to run through it and talk about it and pick out some nice little nuggets.
I hope continue being on people's podcasts. You got a lot to talk about, and I would love to hear. I mean, I can almost get into depth of each stint you've gone through in your career. And I would love to hear it. So keep writing, keep showing your face, and I would love to tune in.
No, thanks a lot, Jacob. Pleasure.